So Bas, thanks for your time to meet again. I think we have met several times to talk about the challenge of the chemical industry with its double twin transition, not only the digital and climate neutral, but also getting circular and all the topics we get with the chemical strategy for sustainability. We have always asked for more coherence and to get that all in one row because it comes at the same time. If you look backwards, it's basically less than 30 years. We have time to totally rebuild the industry from what we produce and how we produce. So we has asked actually for help on that, and now the transition pathway is out. We worked for more than a year on that one, and I'm actually happy that we have this. It's a new tool, or it's actually a new instrument of the Commission. What do you think now by looking at this, I would say, first real transition pathway? So what comes to your mind when you think about it?
I'll try not to be too political in the answer, because of course there is a tendency to say, okay, I see the good elements, but there's also a big but I think we agree on that as well. But I'm curious what you think of it, because I think in principle, I'm also very happy with it, because when we had previous discussions, you rightfully said, so kind of, okay, we are having targets and we want to comply with them. We want to deliver. We will also want to go to climate neutrality in 2050. But for that, we need clarity. And not only targets, but also regulatory clarity. And quite often we got in the discussion, which must be totally annoying for you, is kind of, yeah, but that's national competence, or that's regional competence, or European competence. Which in a way for you is kind of, I don't care. And rightfully so, you should not care. But unfortunately, this is how difficult we made policy making within Europe. So I think to me, what is important about these transition pathways is that we are not only agreeing on the end point, 2050, but that we all know that this is a journey which is not so long, because I very well know this is about decisions on investments you need to take today and tomorrow, and not in 5 years or 10 years. And I think this transition pathway is at least hopefully bringing a bit the kind of the pathway idea and the urgency also, because then we notice, 2050 is not so far away. Where still some politicians, they love to set targets for 2050 because most of the time they're not in power anymore by 2050. So it's easy to do, but it means changes now. And I think that's where the pathways are crucial. However, and here comes still the big but, and I'm curious what you think of it. If I read it, it's still rather vague. It's, I think, identifying the good topics, but what does it mean? What is now going to actually change? That to me is still unclear. And I think that's probably the next discussion to have. So it's now kind of good to have it, good to have that debate, but be careful, especially this is probably a call to the Commission, which sometimes is kind of, we published it, we've done it, and now we can go on to the next topic. No, now basically the work starts here. And I'm not sure that is how it will be perceived by some.
I guess no one is really all the time happy with everything. I agree. I also would have loved it to be even more precise, but I have to say it is a multi-stakeholder document. It's written by the Commission, but it was somehow co-created together. Let's also later we talk about that, co-implemented. I think it's very important. Otherwise, it will not work. I think the structure is very fine. Where I think an important element which we really need is the regulatory roadmap. And there is, I think, a rather fine, let's say, plan what buckets come when. So it is really a little bit a roadmap. Because indeed what we need now with all the competition and all the competitiveness we talk now about with the IRA and everything, we need certainty for investments.
Yeah.
So we need to stimulate certain innovation programs. You know, that takes 5 to 10 years until you have the new safe and sustainable chemicals. So we have to orchestrate this. And so in one hand, it's a long journey, and on the other hand, it's not a long journey. So for that reason, it could have been more precise on the one or the other hand, but I guess this is also what a compromise is at the very end. I mean, I like the structure with the 8 buckets. And then you have the more basically 200 measures, and you have the short term, the midterm, and the long term. So I think this is okay, and I think we can live with it. Now, question is how we really implement it. So, but if you look into this, there's a lot of content into this. What is, from your point of view, the most urgent one when you look on this transition of
I think
chemical industry now?
I think if you take all these targets serious, right, that we have put central in the Green Deal, and you're talking to a green politician, so you will not be surprised that I very much support those targets, which is not only climate neutrality, it is circularity, it is zero pollution. So it's really the broad setting of this agenda. But I do know that that is requiring a big change of industry in very uncertain times. For me, the most urgent matter is it's the investment gap that we are having within Europe. And I don't have to tell that to you, but you also know very well, the investments are not going to Europe right now. And of course, what now comes is a kind of a fundamental, almost political debate. How do we get the investments to Europe? And unfortunately, there the opinions differ. And that means a kind of a new round of political debate, which I'm not sure it will always be helpful. So that's why I'm thankful to have these pathways that at least we're not going to discuss the targets. Please, can we close that debate? But now, how do we get the investments to Europe to make it happen on the ground? And there really, I'm also kind of, let's also then discuss as a green politician and you as a CEO, what are now the biggest challenges also from your perspective, why there is this investment gap in Europe? The political answer sometimes is, okay, we create a fund. And I know that's maybe not even the problem, but it's certainly not the only solution. I do think it can help in sometimes getting some investments going, right? It's a kind of a stimulus, but we need more. And to me, that's for me the most important part of the debate that we need to have now on that transition pathway. If we agree on those targets, if we agree on all those buckets that need to happen, then what are now the crucial steps that you want to see in order to get the investments to Europe?
Yeah, and I fully agree. This is, I think, exactly the security and let's say planability which we need to launch these investments. This is why the regulatory framework is really important one, because that is taking a lot of our resources, is actually taking products away and so on. This is crucial. But what I like also with the roadmap is the bridge is actually going from energy to raw materials to skills to people, which we need all the buckets in order to make this. And I think if you look on the number of the actions, it is actually also very well described that we need access to the renewable energy we have talked a lot about, but it's also the bio-based and the circular raw materials then. I think this is all important and great. And this is also then actually very much then what you need to make that happen, because the investments have to cater the decarbonization and the new technology. So that has to come together. What I like very much with the introduction of the transition pathway is that it on 2 pages really acknowledges the challenges we have. And there are needs also we have for innovation, and that this needs funding and that it needs time. I think this is a very, very important starting point, that we agree as stakeholders also that is really what it is about, because that's the starting point for everything. So I'm very happy. How do you think particularly about this renewable energy piece? The last time we talked about that, it was not fast enough for both of us. Now we have this dimension of the energy crisis, the prices, and from Russian gas. It's even more urgent now, and it has even more to accelerate. Yeah. So you think the transition pathway helps us to really accelerate now the renewable?
I hope so. I hope so, because now also, I mean, from this multi-staker process, this question now comes more to the forefront, because unfortunately also on renewables, there's still a kind of a political debate behind. I think once the war started in Ukraine, the reaction of the Commission, so kind of the people here in Brussels, was very clear. Now we need to accelerate renewables even further. Basically, what we asked for, the Commission was replying to. Yeah. Maybe not because of our action, but more because of Putin's action. But the acceleration was clearly something that the Commission was pushing for. But at the member state level, you still feel that they are reluctant to fully embrace that. I think they will have to. They are moving there, but it's, again, slow. Again, it's going slow, where you feel like, how much clearer do you now need to signal that we need to accelerate this? I think the Commission got the message, but I'm not sure everyone in the political arena. So we are taking steps there. The acceleration will come. I think what was also very important is, of course, that finally the debate also moved to permitting. Yeah. And this is, of course, also a discussion that we had. And let me be very honest here. As a green politician, of course, I have to look also at, I want to accelerate the permitting. I see that point. Sometimes it's too burdensome and too many layers of hoops you need to jump through almost to get it done. But at the same time, there are reasons, of course, why there are some of these permitting rounds to be taken. So what I'm happy with is that we are now really speeding that up, so that we are not necessarily saying, hey, lower the threshold for why you give a permit, but just shorten it. Right. Basically, put pressure on the permitting authorities to speed up, and not to sit back and behind your office and go through all the reports, but speed it up. I think that is very important. That is now ongoing as well. But this still is an acceleration where there is political agreement. I think this transition pathway is now important, that again, this signal is also coming now also from multi-stakeholders. We need further acceleration. I think the biggest challenge we still have is, can we seriously have a more European answer to this? Because it's not only, I mean, for your plant in Ludwigshafen, of course, you need direct connectivity. I see that. But for the broader debate on renewables in Europe, you need interconnectivity. You need a grid in Europe. And that is still something where the member states are very reluctantly working on. I think now the Commission is really thinking of, should we not with legislation push member states? So it's not legislation on companies, but it's legislation on member states. Now, guys, make sure you are providing this interconnectivity, what we need if we want to make renewables successful.
And Bas, I think this is the next step that has to come now, because that is the EU frame. That is also why I spent quite a bit of time to go to the member states, to the state leaders, to actually explain what we want and ask also for support. Because at the very end, now the transition pathway has to be translated into a national one. Exactly. There's the framework, the European, which I hope is really a good one. We need a European single market on energy. I think we all agree upon that. But still, let's say the translation is very much on national circumstances. And this has to happen now fast, and also hopefully in a coordinated way. So this is also why we have to stress now, because having the document out now is the first step, and now many more steps have to come. So this is very important, and then it hopefully has also coherence. So that is why I think at the very end, and this is my hope, that the transition pathway is now really something everyone takes up and brings its own stake in to really make it happen. So if I think about that, we talked about the member states. So what is actually your expectation from the industry now taking up the transition pathway?
I think what I really hope is that we now need to kind of more go to a granular level, right? I mean, you have a transition pathway for a sector, which is, I think, very good, but we all know the chemical sector is quite diverse. And I think there are different challenges, and the decarbonization, for example, can be totally different depending on what kind of chemical industry you are. And I think those differences are, of course, identified. But this means, if you go to a more granular level, is that basically I would like to see now the buy-in of all the individual companies saying, hey, this transition pathway is also there for me. And that means that for me, for our company, that means these investments are now the crucial ones, which are now the crucial investments in order to get to those multiple targets by 2050. Because I fully realize that it's challenging what we are putting in front, but basically that is still on the table, but it will have different challenges for different companies. And what I would like to see now is that each company is kind of, what does that transition pathway in general, now for the chemical sector, how to translate that to my business? And what does that mean? And then we can also have the concrete discussion, where are the bottlenecks? Because I think in general the bottlenecks are clearly identified, but of course it's different when you go to the company level. And that is what I hope now. It's basically what you also say. You hope there is a buy-in from the political level. Well, I hope there is a buy-in now also from each company on this. And that I think we both have to work on, because on the political level, why is it indeed a report? I think this should be further integrated in the entire industrial policy frame that Europe is now thinking of. As a reaction to the IRA, there will be a Raw Materials Act. There is this industrial policy on the table. Well, this transitional pathway should be integral part of it.
Absolutely.
And I have the feeling it's not there yet. So yes, I probably need to work to make sure that it's much more integrated in the minds of everyone who is doing policies which will affect industry. But I hope from the industry much more also the buy-in. What does it then mean for me, for my company?
I agree, but Bas, then we also have to take care that it's not a document that is just there, but we have to keep it alive, which means I would introduce KPIs to measure also what is actually happening. I think there should be also kind of a yearly review. Where are we? What are the gaps in order to stay on track? So it must be alive. I certainly have also hope on politics with their stake. I think by bringing this all together and seeing now how many different measures this is and how complicated it is on the regulatory part, I really hope that also politics acknowledges, with now the learnings also on competitiveness, that we are pragmatic in how we do it. You know that the chemical industry, I personally always was supporting the Green Deal. We never had a topic with what we want to achieve. It was always about the how and the when, which we have now addressed here. But when it now comes to the regulation packages, I mean, it's a lot of details we go in, RED 3 and all these issues. On the other hand, having clear targets and a framework. I hope that with the additional topics and chunks in the regulation that are coming, that we go a little bit more that way, that we have the clear target in mind, but that we are more pragmatic on the how. I think that will help us, that we also can implement later, because it is really, especially for the SMEs, you know, that for the small and medium-sized enterprise, it is tough to get through all these new things they have to do. That is my hope, that we have a strong dialogue, and for me this transition pathway has the starting point of a very intensive one, and acknowledging also respectful discussion we had, and we have to bring that into the future, that everyone is now obliged to bring in his or her stake.
But then I'm of course triggered by the kind of the call for pragmatism, right? And you know, you do that on purpose, and I agree also to a certain extent. But the problem is, of course, where does sometimes regulation come from? If I go to the hydrogen discussion, we all know hydrogen will be key and will be part of the solution, and certainly for high intense energy users like industry and chemical industry is certainly one of those. So hydrogen will be part of the picture. However, it of course matters how we do that, because what we do not want is that through hydrogen you have a new carbon lock-in. And this is where the debate comes from. I can understand very well that you say, but please don't kill the entrepreneurship. We know we need investments in hydrogen because it's a new production way of, so for us, so quite some steps to be taken. But from the political level, we are also concerned of, yes, we want to provide you the hydrogen, but we want to make sure that that hydrogen is not, in another terminology, the same fossil lock-in that we try to get rid of. And there are, of course, quite some parties in this world who would love to sell their fossils through the hydrogen
Which I totally understand. But if you take the
but there, of course, the kind of the challenge comes with, okay, there you need, unfortunately, also some regulation, but how to do that without strangling the innovation that you want to do with hydrogen. I think this is exactly the discussion we need to have, how to find the balance.
Without opening this box, but if you now look in the IRA, how philosophically it's different. I mean, we very much go in the CapEx. The Americans go very much on the OPEX. So you have to take your own money, you invest, and then you get a help that you actually produce something you earn money with. In the case of hydrogen, it's not about the color, it's about the intensity of CO2. And if you really bring it down, you get the $3 per kilo of hydrogen if it's really emission-free. So I think that gives me a little bit this hint that I ask for more pragmatism, that we also go a little bit more from the CapEx to the OPEX side, so that we really, it starts to become a no-brainer for the industry to do all that if it is actually a business case. So, but we move now on from the...
Can I just one on that, because I think we almost get to a philosophical level on the difference between the US and the EU, right? I mean, you're absolutely right. If I look at the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, there are elements in where you think they do that in a clever way, but unfortunately, at the European level, we do not really have certainly not the history or the experience, but also quite often, not even, there it comes again, the competence. So where does Europe then more react on? It's regulation, because that's what we can do very well. You know, and this is kind of, and then I see, oh no, but don't make it too much regulatory. But this is a bit kind of almost a philosophical difference between the EU and the US, which you don't care about because you look at your business. But this is a fundamental change that we need to achieve also at the EU level. We should learn a bit from the US in that sense.
But maybe at the end of our talk, we have maybe one element which you just touch, it's trust. I think we have also to come to the point, and with the learning we have, the industry has to move and we are ready to move. But we have also to get a certain trust and a certain support to get a framework and a space which we can then fill with entrepreneurial needs. So I think if we go a little bit that way, that this is the spirit of the co-implementation we have now. We talk intensively, we talk about what is the best way, how we can actually less punish but more incentivize to do certain things. And then I agree to you, we cannot do things that go in the wrong direction. We cannot afford about that. And it's about climate neutrality, it's about circularity. But I can only tell you the chemical industry is really committed to this. So this is why we are really very happy about the transition pathway. I thank you for all the support you always gave us in that respect. You were always a good sparring partner, also helping us to get that as precise as we can. So, and maybe with everything, if everyone is a little bit unhappy, it's actually a good result.
Yeah, that's also what the Commission always says, right? Oh, it's in the middle, everyone is complaining, so it must be right. I think and maybe trust will bring us there, is that sometimes the compromise is exactly what is the problem, because that's giving this very muddy water. Sometimes it is better, and I hope the transitional pathway helps us in that. Kind of the targets, if we do not start muddying the water on that one, then indeed let's agree on working towards that. And then indeed sometimes I need to give a bit more trust, but I think also within the sector sometimes be a bit more honest to each other. Like, because not everyone is as convinced as you are, if I can say so. I think that's also what we need, more a frank and open debate on that. And then I think the trust will come, and then we hopefully can avoid the muddy water compromises, but a kind of a pragmatic approach to achieving those targets.
So Bas, thank you. I will, as Cefic president, I will do the utmost that really the industry is doing its part. Stay with us in terms of communication, challenge us, but also support us to get pragmatic solutions. At the very end, we all want the same. We love Europe, it's our home, and we want that to be a better home. And that is, I think, where we have to come together with trust, with collaboration, and the right spirit. So thanks a lot, Bas.
Thank you.